Okay, we are back. So today I'm going to be checking out some more of this great consciousness debate from the ASSC, the Association for the Scientific Study of Consciousness. This actually came from a request slash recommendation from Nivadeus or something to check this out. And someone else said I should check out the Kevin Mitchell Robert Sapolsky debate, which I mentioned maybe I was interested in doing. So I think I'm going to go and do that next. Someone else recommended that I check out this David Lewis thing, which I started a long time ago, and I forgot about that actually. But the What Experience Teaches Us lecture, so I was going to check that out, and maybe some more stuff on phenomenal concept strategy or something like that. So my commitment is to be doing this all through February at least. We'll see once I start actually teaching again how much I can do, but I'm enjoying doing it now. People are having some good discussions and recommending that I check out some cool things. So if you have anything for me to look into, send it my way. We'll see if I can get to it. And then also, I wanted to mention that, let's see, well, I don't know when this will be up on the channel, but, coming up on Monday, the 29th, for my Consciousness Live discussion series, I'll be talking with Eric Switchcable about his book, The Weirdness of the World, which is very cool. And I'm looking forward to talking about that with him. And then the Monday after that, which is February 5th, 2024, we will be talking with Steve Fleming and his book, Know Thyself, The Science of Metacognition, which came out last year. And we were supposed to have this discussion last year, but things didn't work out that way. Oh, allergies are creeping on me again. Oh, man. Okay, so I thought that I was in the clear. Anyway, we got Eric Switchcable, Steve Fleming, and then after that, I'm scheduled to talk with Matthias Michel, although that's still up in the air, and then Ned Block, although that's yet to be scheduled, although I should be hopefully setting that up pretty soon. So that's all I have set up for my Consciousness Live discussion series so far. If you know of anyone I should reach out to, let me know. I've reached out to various people, and trying to get the ones I can. Okay, so also I should mention, I guess, while I'm here, that I'll be doing a series of office hours on my YouTube channel, where I just hang out on live, and I'll try to share a Zoom link or a StreamYard link or something so people can come and talk if they want to. I've seen other channels do that, and I think it's cool. So I figured maybe I would try that. I'm scheduled to try one today at 1 o'clock. But if it stops raining, I might go skate instead. Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to see. So if not, I'll be online at 1 doing my live. Been talking a lot about panpsychism and idealism lately, so maybe people talk about that a lot about all this stuff. So cool. And I think that's all that I wanted to say at the beginning of the video. So let's jump right back into this. Just to remind us where we were, we're looking at this discussion here between Steve Fleming. There's Victor Lama here. These are the moderators, Leah and Lucia. And then over here is Stanislaw Dehaene. And then off to the other side, you can't see her, is Melanie Bali. And they've been talking a lot about what they thought the primary objection to their theory was. So we heard from each of these people in turn. So Victor said that the primary objection to the first order theory is the possible existence of consciousness without anyone being aware of it, and people find that counterintuitive. Stan said the primary objection to his theory was trying to give a mechanistic account of how the global workspace is implemented in the brain. So that's a challenge. He thinks that the theories at the computational level not specified very well, and also at the mechanistic level not specified very well. I don't know. I forget if Steve said what he thought the primary objection to higher order theories was. I may be misremembering, but anyway. And then they were discussing this case of where you're driving or absorbed in something. I gave my example of getting off the subway without realizing it and walking down the stairs. People often give the example of driving and being lost in conversation or singing a song and not realizing they got off the freeway or stopped at a stop sign. And then they're talking about reading a good book, or Crime and Punishment had come up. So all of these are supposed to be, well, gee, there doesn't seem to be higher order awareness there. And Steve was explaining that there is a higher awareness possibly. It's just not an explicit one that you do on purpose that's under your control. But then they were just about, when I stopped last time, they were just about to throw it over to ask IIT the same question about what they thought the primary objection to their theory was. So let's go ahead and join in then. I think they're about to throw it over to Melanie. Let's see.
I was aware of the outside world.
Melanie?
Let me bring it to Melanie, yes. So,
Wait, what did you just say?
Of the world while you were in that case, if you're really denying you were conscious of the world while you were driving, then yes. But I don't think when I drive my son to nursery and think about other things, I say I was aware of the outside world.
Melanie?
let me bring it.
Yeah, aware of the outside world, but were you consciously aware of it? Because you're aware of it in the sense that you have to navigate, stop, so forth, make turns, moves, and so forth. But consciously aware, it's not clear, so I don't know. Anyway, so let's go ahead, and I think they're just about to throw it to Melanie.
Melanie,
Yeah.
yes.
So, in the case of the gorilla, what we would say...
So the gorilla we talked about last time, but this is the famous experiment where in attentional blindness, you're passing the basketball or whatever, doing a task where your attention is diverted elsewhere, and then something happens and people say they don't notice it. In the classic case, it's a gorilla walking across the screen. So we talked about last time. You can go watch that video if you want.
is if you have that seeing clearly visible and you have all this going on and you experience you don't see the gorilla, you might, though, see the lower level features, the, black moving.
All right.
You might.
Yeah, so we talked about this last time too. There was a little bit, I think someone was trying to forget who, Liad or Lucia, was trying to get some discussion or debate about whether you see the gorilla, does that mean that you see it as a gorilla, or do you just see the shape of it? And then Victor was saying you see the shape of it, maybe in the colors, but don't see it as a gorilla. So I think this is more important for IIT, where they wanted to talk about these conceptual complexes. MCUs, they used to be called, but I think in the new updated version they got a new name. But these conceptual structures that are sort of identical with conscious experience on their view. So if you have one that's to put the shape and another of the shape as a gorilla, they may be different experiences. So she's going to say you see the shape but not the gorilla. I think that's what she's going to say. Whereas I think that Victor would say you see the gorilla but not as a gorilla. So they might disagree. Is that more than a terminological dispute where one side says, no, you see the gorilla, but you don't see it as a gorilla. And the other side says, no, you don't see the gorilla at all. You see some shapes and color, but not the gorilla. Well, of course, the shape and the color is the color of the gorilla. So it is interesting. Anyway, I should let her finish.
See some aspects.
The problem is I have my sunless tea here, you see, and it's giving me energy.
Level feature without having the category or concept gorilla. You might see some aspects lower level feature without having the category or concept gorilla in your mind. You may even have, activity percolating in the cortical hierarchy until the gorilla area and not.
I do wonder why they're not showing her. Shouldn't they be panning? Because she's over here somewhere. So she's saying what I just said, sort of, that you have activity related to a shape and color, but not to the category of a gorilla.
Not be aware of it, because in our case, when you actually look at what is required to explain phenomenology, you actually need cause-effect power to be fully specific and coherent. The relations actually between the different distinctions have to point to one given specific compositional state, as we call it, and one given specific affect state that are fully coherent. So if something doesn't really fit in some conditions, also like binocular rivalry, that might be the case, it might just be excluded from your experience, and then at some point conditions change and it comes out. But I agree with Victor, it's important to distinguish the lower level features and then the category itself. Now, one thing I wanted to mention about the content, why different types of experiences.
I guess I don't understand what the point she was making there with binocular rivalry. So binocular rivalry, you present two different images to the eye. What people experience is kind of a random shifting between the two, or kind of rhythmic. Sometimes it's rhythmic but unpredictable. If it's a house in one and a face in the other, then you see the house first and then the face, but they don't ever overlap. So that's binocular rivalry. So the representation may be there and then become conscious later. Was that her point? And maybe that's what's going on. Let me rewind this a little bit because I wasn't sure.
You actually need cause-effect power to be at.
Hold on.
Because in gorilla, activity percolating in the cortical hierarchy until the gorilla area and not be aware of it. Because
I see. So she's trying to say that even if there's activity to the gorilla area, which I find hilarious to think of a gorilla area in the brain, but the brain, which is going to be responsible for, your experience of it as a gorilla, that doesn't mean that you're aware. So even if you could show that there's some activity in the brain related to the gorilla, she's saying that's not necessarily going to indicate that you had experience of the gorilla, because it might be like the binocular rivalry there, but not experienced. Was that her point?
in our case, when you actually look at what is required to explain phenomenology, you actually need cause-effect power to be fully specific and coherent, the relation.
Okay, so she's using, so when you look at what you need to explain phenomenology, you need it to be fully specific and coherent. So that's the IIT way of saying that if the state isn't fully formed, then you're not going to experience it's not maximally coherent, or something like the cause and effect power is not fully established. So even if there's activity in the area, which is going to tell you it's a gorilla, if it's not fully settled or formed, they're going to predict you wouldn't experience it. I think that's what she's trying to say here. So that would explain why even if the person walking by you in the gorilla suit is registered by your eyes, and even if you are processing that information to some extent, they could explain why you don't consciously experience it. Is that supposed to be the idea? I didn't realize that IIT was going to make the claim that in the inattentional blindness case, the gorilla was not, the part of your experience representing the gorilla was not phenomenally conscious. Is that what she's trying to say? Or maybe I'm misunderstanding this. Let me.
Actually, between the different distinctions have to point to fully required to explain phenomenology. You actually need cause-effect power to be fully specific and coherent. The relations actually between the different distinctions have to point to one given specific compositional state, as we call it, and one given specific affect state that are fully coherent. So if something doesn't really fit in some conditions, also like binocular rivalry, that might be the case, it might just be excluded from your experience, and then at some point conditions change and it comes out. But I agree with Victor, it's important to distinguish the lower level features and then the category itself. Now, one thing I wanted to mention about the content, why different types of experiences feel different. So there, the approach of IIT is actually to say information, the meaning is in the structure. Information is a form in the mind with distinct.
Right, so hold on. So this is one of the things that people have been criticizing about IIT, is that it's a structural theory of consciousness rather than like a typical neuroscientific theory. But she's right, that it's some kind of structure that the brain implements maybe, or something like that.
IIT is actually to say information, the meaning is in the structure. Information is a form in the mind with distinctions and relations.
Because notice she didn't say brain right there. She said it's a form in the mind with distinction and relation.
And actually, if you look at the explanation for consciousness, the units that would participate in there, the prediction is actually they are the ones that form a system with maximum phi at the proper spatial temporal grain, okay, with likely at this point we bet on neurons or mini colons, yeah? So they would be in or out.
Okay, so she's saying the units are neurons, or the columns in the cortical, the cortical columns?
As part of the system. But actually what does specify the meaning, the relations, how the different constraints piece together do the job. That's the example we have for space, yeah? So depending, a spot in itself wouldn't mean anything. There's no here without there. The structure is needed to give a meaning, which can be a spatial meaning for an extended structure.
Okay, so this is she's trying to explain some basics of IIT. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be like what the biggest weakness of the theory is, which is what the other people were asking, or is she just trying to say something about, generally speaking, IIT? But the claim is that it's the structure. So yes, exactly. You can't say of any given neuron whether it is or isn't part of the structure without specifying the other neurons and its relation to it. Okay.
Or temporal meaning for directed graph and things like this. But the meaning is actually in the structure. So there are two different things. One is the unit and the distinction it specifies in or out. But the meaning, so is it part of consciousness or not, that depends on being part of the substrate of maximum phi. But then what it contributes depends on the structure of these different cause-effect power constraints that specified together, which has to be coherent. Otherwise, it doesn't explain the full specificity of consciousness.
Let me bring you, because you're trying, I believe that
I'm not sure what she's trying to, what question she's trying to address. If this is all about the gorilla, so maybe this will help us clarify.
trying to make one similar point in some sense, that in the case of the gorilla, if I ask, like, do you see a gorilla? Of course you don't see a gorilla because it doesn't have the category and, like the higher level representation. But you would both agree that we see black and white in the place where that gorilla was?
Well, you have lower level features.
See, but I'm trying to understand, because there's two senses in which you can see either see. Well, that's exactly why I'm.
But then it wouldn't be the gorilla category.
Yeah.
Because the objects in that case are fully salient. For us, it's unlikely. Now, so if you look at.
Yeah, because a gorilla is walking around, she means by salient that we'd start like reacting to it. Like, what the gorilla's in here now? That's making me nervous. So, okay, but so the people do disagree about this. So some people think you have an experience of the shape, and then you make an inference that it's a gorilla, but you don't ever see that it's a gorilla. Okay, so that's calling see it as a gorilla, or see that it's a gorilla. But what about just seeing the gorilla? Well, can you see the gorilla without knowing that it's a gorilla? People talk about this sort of stuff. So one of the classic examples is if there's a wall painted a certain color and then a moth lands on it and camouflages itself so that it becomes just the color of that wall, and then you're looking right there and the thing is perfectly camouflaged. Do you see the moth? You're staring right at it, but it's camouflaged. You don't notice it, and so forth and so on. So people have different intuitions about this. Is this what they're talking about, or are they talking about something else? I think more mundanely, they could just be talking about how deep the processing of the stimulus was, like what part of the brain is responding to it, in other words. And I sort of took Melanie's point to be that there could be high-level areas responding to it, but that doesn't mean that consciousness has something to do with it. Because, for example, if the global workspace theory predicts that the prefrontal cortex is activated when you see this, therefore you experience it or something like that, they might respond, well, no, the activation isn't the right kind, therefore it's too quick. And I have lots of sympathy with this, the activation is not the right kind of critique of a lot of the way we argue in neuroscience. So, but I wish they'd move the camera so we could see what's going on over there.
Say perceptual awareness scale results. Sometimes you can have partial awareness of a stimulus in the fact that you know something is presented, but you don't know what. These are kind of partial awareness of a stimulus. So if you look at, for us, it's unlikely. Now, that because the objects in that case are fully salient, for us, it's unlikely. Now, so if you look at, say, perceptual awareness scale results, sometimes you can have partial awareness of a stimulus in the fact that you know something is presented, but you don't know what. These are kind of likely the lower level features aspects. So you might have some awareness of a stimulus without having the category necessarily being present in your mind. But that's a different question. Yes, gorilla is this kind of whole for us, like shape of the category and what it binds as specific features. That would be a different thing than the lower level feature.
Yeah, I understand. But in that case, you would say, you were aware of black and white in that particular space.
But that was not the question you asked.
Of course,
yeah. But now she's asking it.
But do you agree with that? Is that what the subject sees, or the subject sees nothing? Like, what I'm trying to understand is,
You're asking me?
Yes.
Of course, as I said, the subject sees black and white, sees shapes, sees faces, sees.
Okay, so we're just missing the question only.
Yeah.
That's the.
Yeah, so I don't think they're really paying attention to what she's trying to ask them. Or am I misunderstanding what she's trying to ask them? Because it sounds like she's trying to say, look, if you're in this intentional blindness case, then, there goes the gorilla. So you don't see it as a gorilla because when people ask you if anything unusual happened, you say no. So you don't see the person stop and wave the camera and do a little dance or open an umbrella or whatever else weird things they have people do in these things. But do you see anything at all? So I guess Victor's saying, yeah, you see some stuff. You just don't recognize it as a gorilla. You could even make the claim that you see it as a gorilla, but just not consciously. But I guess he's saying that no, he's only committed to you see some stuff, not you recognize it as a gorilla full blown. Okay. And Melanie's saying the same about IIT, and that you could have partial aware, you could have awareness of it as a thing, but not what it is. But even so, it would be surprising because the guy does stop and wave at you. So if you had awareness of the thing going like this, and someone said, "Do you see anything weird?" Well, maybe you thought they're waving for a ball, like pass it to me or something like that. But they do stare right at the camera in these things. Okay. Anyway, yeah, I don't think they're really talking to each other, but I don't really know.
So I want to take you back, Melanie, to the question that we started with.
Okay.
We already got answers from Victor and from Stan. We're still waiting from Steve and from...
I mean, yeah, they're not following through on these things, but I guess they don't have forever. Actually, they do have forever. There's another hour of this left. Anyway, it's live conversation. It's hard to know what's going on in the moment.
Melanie, so what is the strongest criticism you think IIT is facing and should address?
So one important one to address is actually that phi is not computable for large systems like the brain. And there are two different aspects.
Yeah, so that is a major objection, that phi is not computable for something like the brain. There's two parts of that. That's not computable in principle, it's not computable in practice. So let's see what she says.
Kind of to address this question, the first one is phi is computable in a very precise manner for smaller systems. And it is computable using approximations for bigger systems. We have done it in the past using the TMS-EEG work and PCI that tries to capture crudely an approximation of phi. And we are doing it with the 4.
The problem is you can get different approximations of phi, and then you have questions about which one is which. But so that I see what she's saying is that, yes, okay, so they're doing the best they can.
Or framework, more precise, more explicit in the properties of consciousness in one unique measure. We're doing that with functional MRI data currently at the voxel level, and I hope actually we can work as a community. This is also the effort we have to have a wiki and tutorials to actually test this together. The second aspect, though, is that other aspects of IIT are also testable. And this is, for example, these predictions about different parts of the cortex supporting different types of contents. So one, like grid-like networks involving sensory areas being involved not only in this kind of modality-specific qualities, but the spatial aspects. This is something that I'm actually very happy we're testing this now in example collaboration, contrasting predictive coding and IIT. I think it's a really cool way also to challenge the theory, and more of that again has to be.
So what's the idea that grid cells should be involved in spatial experience because of the type of integrated information they have? Is that what they're doing with the predictive coding people? I knew they were doing some experiment with them, but I'm not in on the details of that.
And tutorials to actually test this together. The second aspect, though, is that other aspects of IIT are also testable. And this is, for example, these predictions about different parts of the cortex supporting different types of contents. So one, like grid-like networks involving sensory areas being involved not only in this kind of modality-specific qualities, but involving cortex
Grid-lock?
supporting different. And this is, for example, these predictions about different parts of the cortex supporting different types of contents. So one, like grid-like networks.
Grid-like networks. Okay, I thought she said gridlock. I was like, what? So grid-like networks supporting not just, so in the visual cortex, these networks would not just be involved in processing visual properties like color, but also spatial properties. That's a prediction of IIT.
Involving sensory areas being involved not only in this kind of modality-specific qualities, but the spatial aspects. This is something that I'm actually very happy we're testing this now in example collaboration, contrasting predictive coding and IIT. I think it's a really cool.
I mean, from my point of view, if you like for me, I like higher order theories. So not that I think they're right or anything, but I think they're fun to think about. And one of the things that you would notice if you took that approach was that here, right at this point, you wonder, is this really a prediction of a theory of consciousness? Because IIT, the higher theory says, look, there are going to be these first order states, the states that are, of which we are aware or whatever. And they're going to be first order states about the world. And it'll be interesting to find out that there's first order states in the visual areas that also are involved in color. And they say IIT made this prediction, but is it, so IIT as a theory of consciousness made this prediction? Or IIT as a theory of integrated information made this prediction? And the idea of information integration in the brain being important is goes beyond IIT. So like, is this really a prediction of the theory of consciousness? So I think it is interesting. I'm not trying to say it isn't. I think it's something that we'd have to think about.
Way also to challenge the theory, and more of that again has to be done.
But let me press a bit more on that.
Yes.
So the TMS EEG, beautiful studies. Wouldn't you say, and maybe I'm wrong, that it's also incompatible with GNW, for example? So at the end of the day, it's not proof for IIT because it basically shows you that you need complexity, you need integration.
Yeah, so I guess that's similar to the point that I was just making, is that a lot of these concepts that IIT uses are also used in other areas of neuroscience. So they're not proprietary to IIT. So is this really a prediction of the theory insofar as the theory of consciousness, or is this a prediction of that a lot of other theories are going to accept as well because of the acknowledgement that integration is important? It's just a question about whether it's involved in consciousness the way that IIT says that it is. On the other hand, no one was doing this before IIT was around. No, I mean the TMS EEG thing where they zip and zap thing, I think is what they're talking about, where they like zap the brain with a electrical current and then measure how far it spreads or something like that. I don't know the details, but I think that's what they're talking about. And that gives you a crude approximation of how interconnected, how integrated the systems are. So she's saying, well, that's just, showing that you need complexity. It's like, okay, but who was testing that before IIT? I don't know. Let's hear what Melanie's going to say.
So one thing to say about this is it started from the theory prediction, and it could have been otherwise, like it has been for other markers of consciousness. We actually really put the theories at the test. Okay, it's a crude approximation, but I think we're all there too as well. But TMS-EEG.
But if a lot of other theories are going to agree with this prediction, are you really putting it at risk? I don't know.
It could have gone really wrong, and it worked really well. So that's, again, it's two of the properties of consciousness, information, differentiation, but this was a test of the theory. And now, this is also why we're pushing more the framework to be more specific, like stance that we all have to do, and getting to more predictions, including on the contents of consciousness, the border, all these are things we hope to address, and we are working on it. But it was a test of IIT, designed as a test of the theory, as a challenge of it, and right now it still holds up. More to be done about this. Also, we're working on designing with Brian Edlow a training program for TMS-EEG, involving you guys more at the community, do more of this. But this was a test of IIT, and it still is,
What about one of the, so we all agree that we want theories to explain phenomenology, and one of the things that IIT is different from the other theories, it starts from phenomenology, right? But then at the same time, we heard from Victor that
so they finally panned over. Okay, interesting. So it looks like they're going to switch over to this question. So that's all they're going to say about the objection to IIT. The fundamental objection is phi computable. And she said, well, it's approximatable for physical systems. And these other auxiliary things that IIT says are testable. Yeah, interesting. All right, well, this might be a good pausing point. So let's go ahead and pause this, and then we'll come back and take another stab at this.